person uses about 80 to 100 gallons of water at home every single day. If there's a water emergency, will you be prepared?
Panicked residents forming long lines throughout the day.
We're here at a supermarket in Toledo. You can see the shelves empty where water once was.
To stay safe and healthy during a crisis, you must have access to safe, clean water. Water which will not be available at your local grocery store.
There's a mad dash on right now to stock up on supplies.
The ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system is a must-have for every modern, independently minded household. Protect your family's safety during an emergency. Go to InfoWarsStore.com today to purchase your ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system or call 1-888-253-3139.
Used since before the days of the Roman Empire to support the body's natural systems and enhance overall health. Introducing the new InfoWarsLife.com oil of oregano formulation, a highly advanced nutraceutical form of this key herb that has been traditionally used by civilizations for thousands of years to promote health. We have now procured the most high quality and potent forms of oregano oil on the market, sourced from top leading manufacturers to ensure a concentrated level of bioactive ingredients. Extracted directly from the wild herb and sealed in easy-to-use capsules, you will no longer need to endure the burning of liquid oregano on the tongue. Wild crafted from the Mediterranean oregano species that experts agree is one of the most powerful and most challenging to acquire. This winter season, it's more important than ever to secure this true form of oil of oregano. Now available in our limited first run at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com or call 888-253-3139.
Silk Road was a website that allowed people to anonymously buy and sell drugs and other things that governments wanted to control or to tax. Ross Ulbricht has been found guilty of being the person who ran that website, and he is coming up to being sentenced. We've talked to his mother. Alex Jones has interviewed her because there are many precedent-setting issues in this particular case in the digital realm. There's the issue of transfer of intent. He was just running a website. Did that make him a drug trafficker? There's also the issue of whether or not digital evidence can be used in a drug case, even though it can't be used in a banking case. And then, of course, there's also the issue of what constitutes possession of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. But there's also more mundane issues that we all come across all the time, and that is our violation of our Fourth Amendment, although they find new ways to do this in the digital realm. These are issues that affect all of us. We've reported many times about the government's warrantless search using Stingray. And of course, everyone knows about the NSA and those warrantless searches. But also in this trial, there were issues of documents being dumped at the last minute so the defense could not see it, evidence being withheld from the defense that could have cleared Ross Ulbricht. And of course, a large part of that is the criminal investigation now into two of the agents that were lead investigators in the conviction. These agents have been charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and falsifying government documents. Do you think that if they're going to falsify government documents, that might have an effect on the fairness, on the justice of the trial? We're going to talk to Ross's mother, Lynn Ulbricht. She has put together a site, freeross.org, and that's a place where you can get to know what these issues are, how they affect you, and also help them in their defense, because this is something that, as I said, is going to affect us all. There are large principles involved here. Joining us now is Lynn Ulbricht. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Ulbricht. I'm so sorry that you're going through this. I know this must be a very difficult time for you.
Yeah, it's very, very challenging, but thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Now, of course, there's a lot that's on the line. Your son's sentencing is coming up May 15th. It's possible that he could get up to life in prison with all the charges that they've added. And of course, I think it's important for people to understand there was a lot of talk about murder for hire and things like that, but they limited this strictly. If you look at the things that they indicted him, charged him with, and found him guilty of, it all boils down to drug charges and then adding to that with conspiracy charges. But there's a lot of important precedents about this. I think as we see now, there was a lot of evidence that was not allowed to be presented. The way they handed the evidence to the prosecutors was, I think, very egregious. It looks like they were trying to dump this on them at the last minute, and we can talk about that. But there's also important precedents that are being set in terms of websites, in terms of digital evidence, and I want you to speak to that briefly.
Sure, and just let me make the point, yes, he was not charged for murder for hire.
Yes.
And I believe it's a smear tactic. But anyway, as far as precedent, there are several important things going into the digital age with this case. First of all, most of their evidence was digital. It is totally, you cannot authenticate digital evidence. You do not know who wrote a chat, email, screenshot. And actually, the Supreme Court has thrown out cases based on screenshots.
It's too easy to Photoshop it.
Yeah.
And of course, before we go any further, we need to point out that one of the things we're going to be talking about are these federal agents who have now been indicted, and that was never allowed to come out during the trial. And it was one of those agents who was actually now involved in the murder for hire scam, not your son.
Yes,
That's what the prosecutors are alleging. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Talk.
That's okay. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about because, yeah, so digital evidence. A mortgage company will not take a screenshot of a bank statement because they know how easily faked it is. This case, by accepting digital evidence, lowers the standard for evidence dramatically and makes it a lot easier to put people in prison. You cannot authenticate it. It's very easily faked, manipulated, edited. It's not reliable.
And I think that really kind of highlights what I see with this particular trial here, and that is that we've seen our government routinely ignore the rules of evidence, routinely ignore the Constitution and what the law is in order to make their case, in order to get a conviction. And now we see that in the digital realm, they're even more cavalier about the way they do that. Let's talk about, there's a couple of different issues that the attorney is bringing up to get a retrial. One of those is how they got the evidence about the servers. Tell us about that, because that involves them basically hacking into it. And from what I was able to see, it looks like initially the prosecutors tried to cover up what they did. They hacked into it without a warrant. And when they asked them, how did you find this particular server, they lied about it. They said that it was a misconfiguration of the site's CAPTCHA that had leaked the IP address. Nobody believed that technical explanation, and eventually they admitted, well, we just hacked the site, and then the judge said, well, that's okay. You didn't have a search warrant. We'll allow that evidence.
I think they said, even if we did. I don't know that they've actually admitted. They said, even if we did, it's okay.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Don't have to have a search warrant.
Yeah. And they put people in prison for hacking into.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So, and it's also a question of an FBI agent lying under oath about how he found the server. And then you wonder, what else are they lying about? I mean, he said how he found the server, and experts all over the world said it was gibberish, a lie, inconsistent with reality. It did not compute. And,
so they went into this, and they didn't have a particular search warrant for this. They just basically hacked into it. The judge says, that's okay, even though you don't have a search warrant, even though you hacked into it, you can use that. Now, when they got the physical evidence from your son, they did that with a general warrant. Explain to the audience why that's important.
Well, in the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment specifies that a warrant must particularly describe what they are looking for. They can't just go in your house and rummage around on a fishing expedition to see what they can find. By the way, that picture is the worst picture of Ross. That artist was not facing him, and he doesn't look like that. Anyway, we fought the Revolutionary War partly over this. It's the basis of the Fourth Amendment. And so it's very fundamental and important. And they used the same kind of general warrant to search Ross's laptop, Gmail account, and Facebook. If they'd done it in his home, through his file cabinets and desk, it would be clearly unconstitutional. So it's on his laptop, so it's not. I mean, this is a very important point going forward into the digital age, because we keep more of our stuff on our computers and phones than we do in our file cabinets anymore.
Absolutely. If they don't have to have a warrant, this affects everybody that has a cell phone. And we're seeing that now. They're using that with Stingray. They're going before the judges. In one case, they went before a judge, and the judge says, well, I need to see your search warrant for obtaining this information. How did you get this information? Well, we can't tell you, Judge, because we've signed a non-disclosure agreement. And he said, you don't have a non-disclosure agreement with me. Show me how you got this evidence. And they just dismissed the case and walked away rather than showing the judge. That's the kind of contempt that law enforcement has for the rule of law. It's why Barrett Brown, in terms of talking about how he was railroaded in his case, said we no longer have a rule of law. We have a rule by law enforcement. They can do whatever they wish. We need to understand just how dangerous this is, that they can suspend the Fourth Amendment. They can do whatever they wish. You know, Lynn, when I look at this, we've talked about this before on InfoWars. They broke the idea that you had to be found guilty before they could take your property, going all the way back to the RICO statute. And now we see how they're using civil asset forfeiture everywhere. They're doing the same thing with all of these different rights that we had that were specifically enumerated in the Bill of Rights. They've broken all of these basic freedoms that we fought so long and hard for, that we have enjoyed in Western civilization for centuries. This is all rapidly disappearing before our eyes.
I completely agree, and really I see this case as much bigger than Ross or our family. I see it as, excuse me, some really important points here that, you know, I'm given the opportunity to discuss because of my son, but I really believe that I totally agree with you. And to see it up close and personal like I have is very alarming. You know, a prosecutor takes an ethical, I don't know if it's exactly an oath, but there's an ethical code of conduct that they're supposed to put the truth over a conviction. And
Yes.
I don't see that that is being honored.
Yes, exactly. Because the most important thing, this is why many people have said it's better to let one guilty person go free than to convict an innocent person, because we understand that once we give these kind of unlimited powers to the government, that is the most dangerous scenario. That's more dangerous than organized crime. That's more dangerous than terrorism, because we have given that kind of power to a government without any constraint. So we talked about now what they did in terms of getting the evidence, how they ignored the Fourth Amendment, how they got a general warrant. They didn't get a specific warrant. When they got in physical information from him, they hacked and lied about how they had gotten that evidence. Then when they went to court, what they did with the defense was they essentially withheld information until the very last minute. It looks like they, according to the lawyer, your defense lawyer, they gave 5,000 pages of material just prior to the hearing. It's just a couple of weeks before the hearing, even though they'd had that information for 30 months in their possession. They withheld it until just 2 weeks before the hearing, and then they dumped all kinds of information on them during the hearing.
That's true. Actually, it added up to 7,500 pages, and we figured out that's like reading the Obamacare bill more than 3 times in less than 10 days.
Wow.
So that was, yeah, there was many egregious things that happened in the trial. One of, you know, we had witnesses blocked. They were not allowed to testify. Our attorney was hamstrung in how he could cross-examine. But one of the biggest things was the suppression of evidence, which has now come out with this corruption. And it was sealed. And what happened was, well, we can get into the corruption, but they did not want that introduced into the trial because, of course, it cast tremendous doubt on the investigation that there were corrupt agents involved at high levels of the Silk Road for 2 years.
Yes, exactly.
So,
and before we get to those agents, in terms of the documents, what I saw reported was that they had 145 new exhibits. They modified 50 to 100 others. And one example here, in the last week, within 3 days, they gave them 44 new exhibits. So they didn't give them time to take a look at the evidence. They grabbed information, grabbed evidence illegally, unconstitutionally, and then they withheld evidence and suppressed evidence that could help the defense.
right.
That's
And this,
pretty much every bit of it.
This kind of evidence in the trial, it's a moving target. It's impossible to wage an effective defense.
Yes.
This is complicated information. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that they withheld that was in some of this evidence was information about an alternative perpetrator. Now, one of the things that they were coming forward with in the defense was, is it possible that he is being used as a patsy? We've seen this happen over and over again by the FBI. Most of the terrorist attacks that come out, virtually all of them, as Judge Napolitano and we have pointed out, virtually all of them either involve the FBI organizing, equipping, training the people, and then busting it at the last minute. Typically, that's what happens with these terrorist cases with a patsy. Now, in this particular case, we find that there's now 2 federal agents. One of them, a DEA agent who is alleged to have stolen $500,000 in Bitcoin, I believe. He was also the one that was alleged to have been involved in the murder for hire. Another one who was a Secret Service agent alleged to have stolen $800,000 in Bitcoin. They are now being charged